Some women arrive and the world tilts toward them. Their presence lingers like a scent you can't quite name, a melody you hum long after it's finished. Princess Diana was one of those women. She wasn't just seen, she was felt. She didn't simply wear a crown. She carried an energy that made strangers feel like they knew her, even if they'd only glimpsed her in a newspaper. Decades after her passing, her name still hovers in conversations, headlines, and hearts. That isn't ordinary fame, that's allure. And in this space, her divine era, we decode what makes women like Diana unforgettable. Because allure is never an accident. It's an alchemy of presence, psychology, mystery, and power. Diana's life was complicated, messy, beautiful, and tragic. But the energy she left behind is something every woman can learn from. When Lady Diana Spencer first appeared before the cameras, she wasn't dazzling in the traditional sense. She was 19, shy, her head often lowered as if the world was too heavy to face head-on. Tabloids called her Shy Di because she looked up through her lashes instead of meeting the press with steady eyes. But that awkwardness, instead of weakening her, made her magnetic. People saw a young woman overwhelmed, unpolished, real. She didn't glide into the spotlight flawless. She stumbled into it. And because of that, the public didn't just watch her, they felt protective of her. When she married Prince Charles in a wedding broadcast to 750 million people, she looked every bit the fairytale bride. The dress was extravagant, yards of silk taffeta, puffed sleeves, a train so long it barely fit inside the cathedral. To the world, it was the perfect story. But behind those glassy eyes was a girl already feeling the cracks in her crown. Even then, she wasn't a polished princess, she was a woman in progress. And here lies her first secret. People don't connect with perfection, they connect with transformation. Diana's life wasn't about presenting an untouchable ideal, it was about showing the messy, complicated process of becoming. Watching her evolve from timid teenager to global icon gave the world the sense that they weren't just spectators, they were witnesses. Her vulnerability became her weapon. In a palace built on distance and duty, Diana chose closeness. She wasn't content to wave from balconies. She wanted to touch hands, bend down, hug children, sit at the bedsides of the sick. When she shook the hand of an AIDS patient without gloves at a time when fear and stigma were rampant, it was more than a photo op. It was a statement, a silent, powerful declaration that compassion is stronger than fear, that tenderness, far from being weak, could dismantle prejudice. That was Diana's kind of rebellion. She didn't storm gates with fury or hurl insults at tradition. Her defiance was quieter, subtler, and more devastating. She used empathy as her rebellion, style as her language, silence as her microphone. The night her husband confessed to adultery on national television, she didn't sit at home in shame. She stepped out in what would later be called the revenge dress, an off-the-shoulder black cocktail dress that was short, tight, bold, and unforgettable. She didn't say a word, but the world got the message. That's allure, suggestion, not explanation. She embodied the paradox of being everywhere yet unknowable, the most photographed woman in the world and still a mystery. We saw her laugh, cry, giggle uncontrollably, frown in discomfort. We watched her stumble, confess her struggles with bulimia, reveal her loneliness in interviews, and yet, no matter how much she gave, she always held something back. The world never had her completely, and that's why the world couldn't stop reaching for her. Fascination thrives on what it can't fully possess. Diana's clothes weren't just clothes, they were sentences in an unspoken diary. Soft pastels made her approachable, glittering gowns turned her into a star, sharp suits redefined her as an independent woman after divorce. Every hemline, every shade, every silhouette carried meaning, and the brilliance was that she never explained them. She didn't need a caption. She didn't need to spell out her feelings. She embodied them. She understood that allure isn't about telling people what you are. It's about letting them feel it without words. Her emotional honesty set her apart in a world that rewarded stiffness and perfection. Royals were trained to be porcelain, untouchable, stoic, unreadable. But Diana refused to live behind glass. She let the cracks show. She laughed too loudly when something was funny, the kind of laugh that felt unedited. She rolled her eyes when she was annoyed, reminding us that even princesses have limits to their patience. She wept openly when the weight of her life pressed too hard, showing the world that crowns don't shield you from heartbreak. That rawness broke down walls. It made her not just a princess on a balcony, but a woman you could imagine sitting with over tea, confessing your fears, or sharing a joke that left you both in stitches. Yet here's the brilliance. Diana didn't drown us in her vulnerability. Even in her honesty, she practiced restraint. She gave glimpses, not the full diary. She revealed pieces of herself, but always kept a sacred part untouched. That careful balance is what every magnetic woman learns to master, to connect without losing herself, to be intimate without being consumed, to invite the world in while still keeping a private room locked. That paradox, of openness wrapped in mystery, is what made her unforgettable. Her allure wasn't confined to Britain. It spilled far beyond the palace walls and into every corner of the world. Wherever she went, the atmosphere shifted. In Australia, she won over crowds not with stiff handshakes or scripted speeches, but by kneeling down to the level of school children, laughing with them, letting them tug at her sleeves as if she were an old friend. In Angola, she walked across active landmine fields to raise awareness for disarmament, turning an issue most leaders only discussed in sterile boardrooms into something human, urgent, and impossible to ignore. At the White House, she twirled across the dance floor with John Travolta in a midnight blue gown, creating a moment so glamorous it became etched into pop culture history forever. And in hospitals, when fear and stigma kept others at arm's length, she reached out her hand to AIDS patients, shattering prejudice with a single touch. She became a symbol of compassion not because she was trained for it, but because she instinctively understood the language of human connection. And what's striking is that none of this devotion was rooted in her title. People didn't line the streets or flood the press simply because she was a princess. They came because she radiated something far rarer, warmth that felt sincere, generosity that wasn't for show, and light that seemed to glow brighter in the darkest places. Attention didn't need to be begged for. It chased her relentlessly. She wasn't trying to be magnetic. She simply was. But Allure isn't just about how people see you in your prime. It's also about how people remember you. And Diana's story, with its tragedy, sealed her in amber. When her life ended at 36, she became eternal, forever young, forever radiant. But here's the truth. Even if tragedy hadn't cut her life short, her magnetism was already immortal. She had already proven that Allure isn't about being everywhere, isn't about screaming the loudest, isn't about perfection. It's about mastering the paradox, honesty and mystery, softness and strength, presence and restraint. So what lessons can the modern woman pull from Diana's essence? First, that privacy isn't weakness, it's power. In an age where everything is documented, archived, and broadcast, choosing what to withhold becomes an act of control. You don't need to narrate every chapter of your life online. Some pages are meant to be sacred, tucked away for yourself and the people who've earned the right to see them. Second, that empathy isn't naivety, it's leadership. The strongest people are the ones who can kneel down without losing their crown, who can meet others eye to eye without needing to tower above them. Diana showed us that tenderness, far from being fragile, can be the sharpest tool for change. She also proved that silence isn't passive, it's strategy. In a world obsessed with constant responses, sometimes the most commanding thing you can do is refuse to explain yourself. To let the pause, the absence, the mystery speak louder than words ever could. And finally, she taught us that imperfection isn't a flaw, it's the bridge to connection. People don't fall in love with flawless statues carved out of marble. They fall in love with the woman who stumbles, rises, and keeps walking. That resilience, messy, human, real, is what lingers in memory. Now, imagine embodying her mindset today. You give generously, but never so much that you feel emptied. You share just enough of your story to connect, but you leave enough unsaid to keep people leaning in. You let your clothes, your gestures, the way you carry yourself do the talking before your words ever need to. And when you choose to rebel, you don't do it with a megaphone. You do it with subtlety, with timing, with elegance. You let the world piece together your story like a puzzle instead of handing it over in one exhausted monologue. That's not just grace, it's strategy. And that, at its core, is allure. And if there's one thing Diana reminds us, it's this. You don't need to be loud to be unforgettable. Presence doesn't come from volume, it comes from vibration. Some women linger in memory, not because they shouted the longest, but because they whispered the softest truth, because they glowed in a way that couldn't be faked, because they left a trace of themselves, like perfume caught in fabric, like warmth in a room that clings to you after they've gone. That's Diana, that's Allure. So here's my sister-to-sister advice: protect your mystery. You don't have to broadcast every detail of your journey for it to be valid. Don't explain every season of your life to people who haven't earned access to it. Let them lean in. Let them wonder. Let them crave your glow instead of consuming it until there's nothing left. Don't chase attention. Carry yourself with such quiet conviction that attention can't help but follow. That's what Diana embodied, and that's what you can practice in your own divine way. Because allure isn't about controlling others, it's about mastering yourself. It's knowing that restraint can be richer than revelation, that softness can move mountains, and that sometimes the most unforgettable women are the ones who choose to remain partly untold. Diana will always linger in our collective memory because she never gave us everything. The less she revealed, the more we longed to know. That's not just legacy, that's the art of allure. And now, as we close this chapter, let me leave you with this. Picture her walking through a crowd, that shy tilt of her head, that mischievous half smile, that glow of someone both fragile and unbreakable at the same time. Picture how the air shifts when a woman owns both her softness and her strength. That is what allure feels like. It doesn't shout, it doesn't rush, it lingers. And decades later, it still holds us. That is Diana. That is allure. And that, sister girls, is her divine era. If this spoke to you, don't just let it fade when the video ends. Carry it, embody it, protect your mystery, lead with kindness, and never forget that your power isn't in how loudly you announce yourself, but in how deeply you are felt. And if you want to keep learning from the women who mastered this art, make sure you subscribe, share this with a sister who needs it, and join me for the next episode. Because some lessons are too powerful to keep to yourself.